What I'm teaching lately and writing about, and I've got about 92 pages of a book, not finished, but anyway, written. And I'm writing that book with my good friend Judy Delosia. And I don't know how long it'll take to get out, maybe a year or so. And I'm calling what I'm doing now wisdom coaching. And the reason why I'm calling it wisdom coaching is I believe when people read what we've written, there's a good deal of wisdom wrapped up in what we're writing about. And that wisdom, I think, is what can really help you get through life in an emotionally satisfying way. So rather than just having 10 or 12 or 14 techniques and use this technique for, for depression and this technique for something else. We have techniques also, but we believe what's the most important thing is the philosophy that you're using as you go through life. So last week, I mentioned the 4 of the top 10 key points that come to mind when thinking about Seishindo. And today, I'm going to give you another couple of points. And prior to giving the couple of points, because this is what comes to my mind, is my understanding is that pretty much all of us, except a couple of very lucky few people, pretty much all of us have been what I would call miseducated in the course of our lives. Maybe your father's told you you're a no good, lazy son of a bitch. Maybe your mother said, "Oh, Charlie, why are you such a baby all the time?" Maybe someone said whatever. And because our parents in particular are the people that are taking care of us when we're really young, seem like godlike to us, we wind up taking on one or two statements. One is, and someone's saying good morning, I don't know who that is. We wind up taking what our parents and other caretakers give us, we wind up believing it as if it's the truth. And then what you'll find is, for the rest of your life, you'll have that belief about yourself. And if it's a negative belief, you'll wind up causing yourself a good deal of problems along the way. So part of what we look to do here with wisdom coaching is to just get you to have more life-affirming, positively oriented beliefs. And when we work with people, or when I work with people in particular, it's very amazing when I'm working with someone, and I just use the name Fred, so I can always just talk without, actually identifying anyone. But if I say to Fred, Fred, in my understanding, you're a highly intelligent, highly capable human being. Fred doesn't believe me in the beginning. And I have to kind of talk him into it because he thinks, and he has these negative beliefs about himself. So that's what we're looking to, in a gentle way, re-educate people. So one of the points that started Seishindo was believing that everyone has the ability to be healthy, to survive and thrive, and they're excellent learners. Excellent learners. And there's an example right there. As an excellent learner, none of us are excellent at learning everything. So maybe one person is really good at computer-oriented stuff. Another person's really good at things relating to cooking and other and other arts like that. But we are all built to be healthy, to survive and thrive, and to be excellent learners. And then the next point is that we're all naturally compassionate and we have an innate wisdom and intelligence, along with a highly evolved self-healing capacity, even though we might have lost touch with these deeper aspects of ourself over time. So just learning or just hearing what I'm saying in regard to these 2 points, maybe you're already going, really? And in our belief, which is a belief, it's not the truth, we believe that we hold these things to be true, and we interact with our clients and our friends and our loved ones as if these things are true. Yes. Okay. So I'll only do 2 points today because I find it's a lot of talking and I don't want to get you too much up in your head. And one of the techniques we've developed in Seishindo is called breath talking. And Joel's raising his hand, so that must mean something.
Rob asked if you could repeat the second point.
Rob asked if I could repeat the second point. I'd be happy to do that. I just have to scroll up.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your flow. You said everybody has the ability to be healthy, survive, and thrive, and are excellent learners. And then you said people are naturally compassionate, and that we have a
Innate wisdom
self-healing
and
capacity.
resilience, along with a highly evolved self-healing capacity, even though we might have lost touch with these deeper aspects of ourself over time.
All right, we're gonna have to do some one breath talking on that.
Yes. Well, and part of what happens, Rob, is I said last class, and I'm sure I'll say it numerous times, I had a fantastic doctor during my cancer treatment. And I was very lucky because I just make this up, he was going to be seeing the 4th new patient on the day that I showed up, and I happened to be the 4th new patient. And he was known to be the best surgeon in the hospital, and he was the #1 doctor in the hospital. And there's no maybes in his way of thinking about things when he talks to you. He deals with the science, and the science is the science. And I said last time, I'm pretty certain, that because I got him to tell me the truth, he said, you have stage 4 cancer, and that means, in medical terms, you're not meant to make it through your treatment process. You'll die before the treatment process is over. And that was pretty big news to hear. And I said, well, I'm not happy to hear that, but I'm really thankful that you're telling me what you understand the situation to be like. And then in regard to we're all excellent healers, Rob, the reason why we're saying this, including a highly evolved self-healing capacity, I went beyond what was expected by the medical community, and it's now like 2.5 years later, and I'm still alive. Okay, is my throat hoarse right now today? Yes, but I'm alive. And in order to do what was necessary on my end of the treatment, I had to believe that I could very definitely outperform what the medical community was expecting of me. And that wasn't a simple task. I didn't just go like, oh, I'm hot shit, I can do, blah, 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 and whatever. And particularly, for instance, with the chemotherapy, when you get really, really sick from the chemotherapy, because they're putting they're putting poison into your system. Like in my case, I would get a 15-hour, I would get a 15-hour drip, and it's 15 hours of poison going into your system. And as I'm talking now, and particularly since Rob is here, I'm being reminded to shut down line and other things that cause little bing bing. So I had to outperform what the doctor said was likely. And the most important thing to help me with that personally, and there'll be other things for other people, is my years of intense study in Aikido. And in Aikido, part of the training, and I got all of that training in Japan, part of that training was things like going into an ice cold river, literally ice cold river, up in the mountains on January 5th of every year, and those kind of things, so that you really got to know and experience that you're capable of transcending. So we all have this highly evolved self-healing capacity. And in order to really bring that to the forefront, you're going to have to not believe in what you're hearing from, certainly from people around you and the medical community. So one of the techniques I've developed over time, and this happens to be one of Rob Schwartz's favorite techniques, or at least that's what he told me to compliment me a long time ago. Why he wanted to compliment me, I have no idea. But it's called breath talking. And what I say is, when you harmonize your words, your speaking, with your physiology and your breathing, you give your body the opportunity to digest and better comprehend your emotions. You give your body a better chance to digest and better comprehend your emotions. So we know from Dr. Gershon, a researcher, scientific researcher, that all of the serotonin in the body is manufactured in the gut, in your gut, and it has nothing to, it's not getting any signals or signals, I guess we can say, commands from your brain. It's all happening in your gut. So that I believe that your emotions start in your body, and then they kind of float up into the brain, and your brain reports on everything. And one thing I know, not that I didn't have brain cancer, but when you have cancer, you learn all sorts of things, is people that have brain cancer are usually not in any pain. It will still wind up killing them, but why are they not in pain? Because the brain has no capacity to feel anything, pain or pleasure. The brain has no capacity to feel anything, either pain or pleasure or anything in between. So you need to give your body the opportunity to digest and better comprehend your emotions. So I could read here about, maybe it's a full page of instructions on this technique, but I'm going to do something that I hope is a little better. I'm going to ask, if Rob doesn't mind, I'll ask my friend Rob in a moment here. I want you to give me a topic, Rob, that, like a lot of other topics, you're pretty certain I know next to nothing about. So you're going to say X. It could be cricket. It could be whatever. There's a million topics, if not more, that I know next to nothing about. Some of which I'm quite clear that I know next to nothing about. And then after you give me that topic, Rob, I'm going to talk about that topic that I know like nothing about for, I don't know, about 5 minutes. And what I'm asking all of you listening is just get what I would call a felt sense. How are you feeling as you hear Charlie talking about this topic? Okay, Rob, please.
So, and tell me if you know about this, and I'll change it.
Okay.
Uh, Wind patterns and how wind patterns work around the globe.
That's an excellent topic because I know nothing about it. I know a couple little nothings about it. Okay, here we go. So first of all, I want to take a moment to thank Rob for a lot of things, not just about wind patterns, but just for being a good friend and a wonderful human being. And, you know, when you develop a relationship with someone who's a wonderful human being, it gives you a lot more, I believe, gives you a lot more satisfaction and pleasure in life than knowing about global wind patterns. And I guess, in a way, that's why I don't know anything about global wind patterns. Because I've been spending my time and energy doing my best to make good relationships with people. And in making good relationships with people, I also know that I don't always do a good job in that. Particularly when you're a talker like me. Sometimes I get talking. And I'm not really paying attention to how interested my counterpart seems to be in my fantastic story. But I would feel somewhat remiss if I didn't say at least something about global wind patterns. And what I do understand, and it's most likely a flawed understanding, please hear that I'm saying that, is that El Nino and La Nina, which cause big changes in weather patterns, and bigger every year now lately. I've read somewhere, I think, and I could be wrong, that these somewhat circular wind patterns are actually changing direction and going in the other direction. And in doing that, they're becoming more and more powerful. So I feel good about having said a little something about the topic that Rob brought up. And I'll stop here, not to overly bore everyone. Thank you. So, the people on the call, what did you think as you heard Charlie talking but not talking about global wind patterns?
Charlie, the first thing that I picked up was your pacing with that allowing for the pause in between statements, obviously timing it with your breathing.
Yes. And when I was doing that, Dennis, I wasn't in my head thinking, okay, let's see. I think about 4 seconds will be good for the inhale, 5 seconds on the exhale. It was just what my body actually wanted to do. Okay, someone else, please. Let's have some more information, including Rob can say something, of course.
I'll say that I noticed that while I was paying attention to my body while you were talking, it felt very easy to be moved.
When you say moved, what do you mean exactly, Denny?
I mean, there was a sense of almost vulnerability or honesty in what you were communicating that I felt moved by.
So I get a smile on my face when I hear that, because I love hearing something like that. There I was talking about wind patterns, or almost talking about wind patterns, and I didn't, as far as I recall, and please correct me if necessary, I didn't say anything about, I don't know, my idiosyncrasies or my weaknesses in life or whatever. But yet, what was it you say? You felt some sense of vulnerability and what, please?
And honesty.
Honesty. Wow. I think that's fantastic. And, you know, with my friend Rob Schwartz, who I do know quite well, he's been my coach for how long now, Rob? A couple of years? He's nodding his head yes, so I think that means yes. So
I'd
he,
have to check, yeah.
excuse me?
I would have to check, but that sounds about right, yeah.
Okay. Close enough for government work. So Rob's been teaching me a method for engaging with new clients, or maybe more accurately to say, engaging with new people that we're hoping might likely be new clients. And we won't go into that technique or overall way of doing things right now, but anyway, here's what happens, which I wind up feeling guilty about. And this happened just the other day. Here I am following the set of procedures that Rob taught me. And in fact, I wasn't even planning on trying to become a coach to this gentleman. And next thing you know, he's asking me for coaching. And then he winds up saying something to the effect of, you know, I just want to say, you're one of the nicest people I've met in a long, long time. And I'm like looking around and stuff like, huh? Me? So that, yeah, Denny, when you slow down and you talk in a rhythm that sits well, that lives well in your own body, people start, I'll use the word hallucinating, all of these nice things about you and or themselves. So when you were feeling the vulnerability, and what was the other one again?
Honesty.
Honesty. In yourself, in me, what? How, what was that about?
It's an interesting way to ask the question because it was a reluctantly used. It was like a sort of empathy, like that. This is the vibe that I'm picking up from you. I'm feeling it in myself because I'm feeling and paying attention to my own body and the effect of you speaking on my body, and that's where I felt it.
Okay, so just to get clear, because I wasn't able to be really clear with what you just said.
I'm sorry.
Are you saying you were kind of feeling those feelings about the both of us at the same time, or not? I'm not trying to talk you into saying anything.
Yep. It was that might be a good way, a kind of maybe resonance, right? That like this is the vibe I'm picking up from you, and I'm feeling that in my body from your speaking. Like
Okay,
that's
so there's a word that I love in general, resonance. And and some people are shaking their head yes. Um, it's, you know, it's really funny. Rob just shook his head yes, and somehow he showed up on the screen as the primary person, as if he was talking. And I don't think he has any parts loose, but anyway. So resonance. And certainly what I find as a coach, when you get a new client, and if they're really feeling distraught, and they're really, in my case, saying, "Oh, Charlie, you know, blah, 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 blah," and you say something positive or supportive, what I find is they often don't sense any resonance. They just seemingly kind of disregard it, almost as if you didn't say it. So resonance is a lovely, lovely term. And of course, we're not talking about when I get really angry, it resonates out to everyone. Oof, I wouldn't want to be doing that too often. When Charlie slows down, as he's doing right now, and I'm just taking a deep breath now before I go on, because that deep breath, well, I was going to say, is more important than the words I was going to say. But then I already had another thought, which is that deep breath deeply influences and sometimes changes the words that I'm about to say. And I take a deep breath again. Okay, so Beverly, Julie, Mike, what would you like to say to add or detract or whatever to what's been going on here?
I can say something.
Okay.
I was attending to the sensations that I had in my body as you started, and you started in gratitude. So I immediately felt a very strong warmth in my heart and just began to really listen to how you were connecting and creating a field that was open and pure and what's the word I'm searching for? Truthful and yeah, you began to create kind of an emotional resonance. And then when you moved into the stories about the wind, it was very calming, even though you were talking about catastrophic atmospheric events. But then I began to just really settle into myself and kind of relax, and then just really began to enjoy being in this presentation.
Yes. So you see, with the years that I'm listening to as I teach this class, what I find so fascinating, and I love it, similar to one or two things that Denny said, is you said truthful. So, and like I said, talking to this new potential client just the other day, when he said, "You're one of the nicest people I've met in a long time," and I'm like, I'm really embarrassed when he says that, and I've had it happen before, because I'm the same schmuck that I was the day before, except now I'm doing some of what Rob Schwartz taught me, and I'm a nicer guy immediately. Wow. Isn't that fantastic? And, as a coach, looking for new clients, I think any honest coach will tell you they've had a lot of angst over the years as to whether they're going to get this new client that they're talking to today, or whether they wind up with a stable of clients that's good enough, big enough to earn them a decent living. And when you completely take your focus off of selling people the new widget that can make a complete difference in your bicycle riding from here on out, this is the very best front light that you can have for your bicycle. And I can sell you this for $17.95. When you do away with any internal conversation about, I could use a little extra income and whatever, and you just slow down, get in, I'd call it harmony with yourself. And the other person, this is what I'm finding, having studied with Rob, the other person pretty much immediately gets that you're not trying to sell them. And they feel relieved by that, by the way, is my experience. I mean, they were quite hesitant to agree to the call because, he said he's not going to try to sell me, but chances are he's going to really try to sell me. So when I slow down, the client slows down, or a hopeful client, and they get more comfortable in themselves. They feel a resonance. They even go as far as to think that Charlie's a nice guy. Wow. And, excuse me, and that's exactly what we're looking to do with clients when we do take them on as clients and they actually start telling us about their problems. And where that can be particularly important but also tricky is when you deal with someone that's telling you about something that was deeply traumatic to them. So let's say I've had a few ex-military people as clients, and they were in Afghanistan and such event happened, and it was very traumatic to them. And what I find, this is what I attempt to do, and I'm purposely slowing down to feel what it is I do. I say, wow, Fred, That must have been really difficult. And you listened to my voice tone and such just now. What I very much don't want to do in any way, shape, or form, get into poor Fred, poor Fred. Because that will just tend to make his life more difficult. And Rob is speaking. Go ahead. Who wants to speak?
Charlie, what's coming up for me right now, just because, I've had the privilege of you sharing this technique with me years ago, and I can't say enough about how useful and powerful it is. And I don't know if you were planning on doing a demo with somebody, but I would love to see that.
Okay.
See somebody have that experience on the receiving side.
Okay. So I was thinking, am I going to do a demo or do something else? So since you asked,
I'll open it to you and to the group.
If there's anyone that very definitely doesn't want a demo, be quick to tell us. And if not, I'll do a demo. Okay. Which one of you brave people would like to get involved in the demo with me?
This won't hurt a bit.
Yes.
Okay, Charlie, I'm game.
Okay, good. And this is Dennis Lawson. And Dennis, I'm just wondering, just by the way, if you don't mind me asking, I don't think it's a personal question, but does your lamp have an eyesight problem?
I do occasionally need a little extra light to make things work. These are not a fashion statement. I actually do have to wear them. So.
Yeah, but I'm asking about the two pair of glasses that are on the lamp.
So those Charlie are my hypnosis glasses.
Yes. Back to the 60s.
Right.
Okay. So Dennis, here's the deal.
Okay.
I'd like you to sit up in the middle of your chair and be facing us straight on. Okay. And you're still, my friend, not quite in the middle of the chair. Either that or your chair is crooked because, yeah, okay, that's closer.
Okay.
Good. And take a few fairly deep breaths as I'm talking. And I'll just say that as you're taking these breaths, I want you to take a breath in that goes all the way down to your pelvic floor. And you can actually feel the pelvic floor push down a little bit. And you will tend to feel your anal sphincter opening up a little bit. I call it flowering. And then as you start to exhale, the anal sphincter closes back up again and the air goes completely up. And I'm going to ask you to keep your eyes fully open for now. Okay. And I'm going to ask you to tilt your head a little bit this way. Yes. And put your chin down a little bit. Yes. So I'm adding a little extra piece, Rob, because I find that it just works better when I add these extra pieces of setting him up so that his body is nicely balanced. Because when your body is imbalanced, your thinking will tend to be somewhat imbalanced. And again, a little bit, your chin down. Yes, so bless his soul. His soul is already being blessed without me mentioning it. Dennis has a a habit of a little bit floating up out of his body into his head. And when you hear me say that, and it's not the truth, it's just my opinion, what's your take, Dennis?
That's quite accurate. I tend to be in my head way too much. Yes.
Yes. Okay. And I hope you were loving yourself as you just said that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and again, Dennis, down with your chin and tilt your head a little bit this way. So Dennis has, I'm going to call it, for want of a better term right now, a physical habit. When you lift your head up, you tend to float, anybody tends to float out of your body and just be in your head. And one of the ways that I figured this out a long time ago, and this isn't I'm not the only one that thinks like this, but when I first realized it was watching marathon running on TV. And you go, huh? And what happens is in the later stages of the race, and they're showing you the top runners, of course, the runners put their head back. And I was pretty certain, and then I wound up studying about it, and then I think I'm correct, to get to where they're not feeling the pain in their body. And they want to be just in their head, quote unquote, where they're saying, that's it, you're fantastic, keep going, whatever, without feeling maybe the blisters on the soles of their feet and such. Okay. Have you been doing a little breathing, Dennis, or did you forget about that?
Yeah. Yes, I've maintained the breathing, although I was listening pretty closely. Yes.
Okay. And less than before, but tilt your head again a little bit this way. Yes, good, perfect. And in rhythm with your breathing, since I know you were paying attention to me before, I'm going to make your job easier than my job was. I'm going to ask you, just listen and don't do anything until I ask you to do something. I'm going to ask you to talk about global wind patterns. Now that I've greased that conversation nicely. And so what you're doing is you're breathing in, and of course, it might be almost impossible to talk on your inhale. And then on your exhale, the breathing out is happening more or less, quote unquote, on its own. And you let the words ride on the breath. And keep the idea that paying attention to your breathing pattern is a lot more important than the words that you actually say. And you might be willing to believe for at least a few minutes what Charlie said is that when you pay attention to your breathing, it will affect what it is you're saying. And there might even be someone here today like Denny or someone that actually said he felt resonance and that you were being vulnerable and honest or something. And I'd like to ask you a little bit again with your head. And you seem to be tensing the area of your eyes, or at least to me. Yeah, wow. Were you really tensing that much? That's interesting. No, you went back to tensing. Okay. Start talking, please.
Start talking about global wind patterns.
Inhale. Perfect. You're doing great.
It's interesting that we would be discussing global wind patterns, in that I too know very little about weather patterns in general or global wind patterns.
Inhaling and going. You're doing perfect.
And yet I've seen the darker side of weather patterns, having grown up in New Orleans. I'm certainly familiar with hurricanes and tropical storms.
Okay, and look at me a little bit, and Dennis, your head like this, and your eyes wide open. Go ahead, you're doing great, my friend.
And it's wonderful that I'm doing great and getting that external approval. And
Your eyes.
I don't I don't find any concerns with this subject matter, and it allows me to think deeply on past experiences.
Yeah, your breathing, let me suggest, is what allows you to think deeply about past experiences. Go ahead, you're doing great.
In a way that I'm grateful for having those experiences that were sometimes quite emotional.
Good. Let me add a little bit since we're teaching here.
Mhm.
Isn't it wonderful that you start talking about feeling grateful? And you most likely didn't have it in your checklist. I'm going to talk a bit about global wind conditions, even though I know nothing about that. And I'm going to wind up feeling somewhat grateful. And you see, my experience, whether it's correct or not, is when you talk about feeling grateful, the only way anyone can make any sense out of that is going inside and feeling what it's like when they're grateful. And before you know it, we've got a bunch of grateful people on the call. Take a deep breath, please. And tell us how you're feeling right now, Dennis.
There's a real sense in my body of deep relaxation without the uh, without the disconnection of a trance kind of state.
Okay, when it's without the disconnection, what is it with?
It's with more of a sense of body first and mind following.
Okay, and I'll just interact there a little bit and say, you are all mind. Your body has great mind, and then there's that big lump of bone and stuff up above your shoulders. That's your rational mind manifests out of that. But your body has great mind. Okay, gonna ask you to pause, and thank you. And Rob, what's your take on what you're watching?
Yeah.
When you taught me years ago, there were a couple nuances that are a little bit different that I think were really useful to me. So I think I'm noticing some of the difference. So one thing I would share is uh, this is kind of a unique way of doing it, where you pick a subject you don't know about, and you give yourself permission to riff without knowing, like, oh my God, I don't know. So that's a cool that's a great way of doing this. The other instruction that you gave us back then um, is to really have the person share just one thought per breath, and then another thought comes out, and giving yourself permission to pause. So
Yes.
what I found useful about that instruction is when people start stacking thoughts, they go back up here. At least
Yeah.
that's been my experience doing it.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And so I found that to be a useful instruction to um, and in sharing this with clients, they can use this with an issue in their life and it has a completely transformative impact.
Yeah.
I
And
did it this week, in fact.
yeah, I'll say it a little differently if you don't mind. It leads to a transformation that's exceptional.
Yeah.
Because I always like to do away with the it. You know,
Fantastic.
it's exceptional. What's exactly is it? So yeah, it leads to yes. And you have a very good memory because that was a long time ago when I was teaching that and you were in Tokyo. And doing it, you see, often we're talking about something that we think we know about, but we don't really understand it. And that's why we're struggling with it. It's much simpler to recognize I don't even know anything about this topic and I'm going to talk about it. Go ahead. So I think there's a certain freedom in that. And I think I purposely chose global wind patterns, of course, because good, bad, or indifferent, Dennis had already seen that performed. So he knew it was definitely doable. Um, and that, here's something I think is really important, Rob. And guess what? The most important thing that he's talking about is not global wind patterns. And that's something that I find it's really important to teach our clients and ourselves, which is kind of like this. You know, Rob, you came here today and you told me you wanted to talk about X. And just my opinion, which is not the truth, almost immediately upon your starting to talk about X, number one, I felt like you were getting a little overwrought. And number two, there was another topic that comes before X, which you weren't actually stating, but to me seemed to be driving the conversation about X. Yeah? You have that experience when you're working with people, Rob?
Yeah, maybe I would use slightly different language, but yeah, what they're talking about is an armature of what they really want to talk about, or it's just a pathway, and it's everything around that is where the solution starts to emerge.
Okay, this is fantastic. Did you use the word armature?
Yeah, I love that word.
Wow, that's an architect's term. But say the thing about surrounding it and everything, because it's very important.
Yeah, Dennis is talking about global wind patterns. And around that, in the pauses, that's where he can have insight. That's where he can experience gratitude. And I get to have an experience of him having an experience of gratitude, which is pretty cool.
Yes. So then he started all of this today by saying, wow. And he was feeling resonance and vulnerability and such. And I'm like, oh, really? I wasn't feeling vulnerable. I wasn't saying anything about my bad habits or whatever. So isn't it great? So I'd like to do one more thing before the class is over. But I also want to make sure that people are feeling like this is a complete piece. Is everybody happy to go on, or does someone want to say a little more, which could be fine? Okay, so usually when people say nothing, that's a good sign. So take a moment as I'm searching through my document here, because some things I like to say exactly. And you can close your eyes or not. And, you know, it's interesting, something Dennis said about, and I think this is a common experience, that he seemed to say something like, I didn't feel that split between mind and body that I often feel when I go in trance. And I'm hoping that when people go into trance, they're actually feeling their thinking mind and their body joined together. So there's a signal that my computer just gave me, and I don't even know what that signal's about, but I think we can go on. And just begin to feel your physical body sitting on the table, wow, in your chair, on your chair. And listen to the sounds in your local environment. Joel told me earlier that he was hearing some sounds coming from my local environment. Might have been my girlfriend doing something or whatever, but I didn't have any way of really altering that, so I just said, okay. And even with us out having a topic right now, you might have some visual images. And go ahead and take some time to consider who you are when you don't have internal dialogue going on. Huh? What do you mean, no internal dialogue? And take some time to consider who you are when you aren't feeling worried and or frightened. And yes, take the time to consider what your structure of happiness is. And you know, Eckhart Tolle talks about our primary and secondary purpose in life. And my interpretation of what he says is that our primary purpose in life is to be right here, right now. To be right here, right now, in the only moment that there really is. And our secondary purpose is to listen for and to listen to for and to our particular calling or mission in life. In other words, what your work in the world is truly meant to be. So primary purpose, to just be here now. as Ram Dass used to say. Secondary purpose. While you're here, what are you really meant to be doing? And keep in mind that just doing something is not nearly as important as being. And Eckhart says that who you are cannot be defined through thinking or mental labels or definitions, because who you are is beyond that. And what you are is your very sense of being, your presence, which is there when you become conscious of the present moment. And it's really felt and developed in the space that comes in between the words, the pausing. Because, in essence, you and what we call the present moment are at the deepest level one and the same. And we believe that our life works best when our ego is in service to our soul. Our ego is concerned with our role in life, our position in life, our ambitions, while our soul is our essence. And our soul connects to the larger system of life, the universe. And yes, maybe that's a mouthful. Maybe that's part of the reason why I paused. But just consider it right now. And there's a gentleman whose name I don't know how to pronounce properly, Katopika Akoma, a man of African descent. And he says our primary purpose, which is just to be here now, always leads to our secondary purpose. And to understand this concept better, I will use a piano as an example. This is what Katopika says. The primary purpose of every key on a piano is to make music. But each key, like an A or a B flat or whatever, each key has its own secondary purpose, which is to play a specific note and only that specific note. And I think we'll all do well to consider our primary purpose being to, and I say this in quotes, to serve God. And in Seishindo, we don't have a coherent definition of God yet. But we believe in general that God refers to the energy and intelligence that somehow orchestrated the world to be where it is today. So to make our statement simpler, and thus hopefully easier to understand and digest, I believe our secondary purpose in life should be to be of service. And I think for most people, this is just the way it seems to me, their secondary purpose has been to thrive personally. And they sometimes will even say, I wish I had more time to be of service. And I'm suggesting that the time is now. And now, and now. That's right. Who would like to talk about how they're feeling now, or any thoughts they had while I was talking, or whatever you'd like to say? Mike Landry, who is yet to show his picture today, his face. Beverly, who I'm seeing. Hello, Beverly. How are you feeling right now, Beverly? I can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
I was saying pick on Michael. um, Thoughtful. Um, just trying to focus on being here and finding what I can do.
Yeah, great. And Beverly, focusing on being here, I think is kind of a moment-to-moment task. And most of us are not all that adept at it. And at the same time, I think you'll serve yourself in the long run if you simply say something like doing my best, or don't even say that, just focusing on being here. And because what happens is, I think our mind is often like cats, where like if you have one of those things on a rod, and then something coming down, and whether it's a little butterfly or whatever, and you flip it around in the air, and the cat can easily start going crazy for that. And it's their whole reason for living, it seems, for at least 10 seconds. And then you just take that away, and the cat's like lays down and goes back to sleep. So good. Good. Michael Landry, good to see you show up.
Yeah, I had to figure out the systems change how to get the video working. I felt really calm and centered, and it actually took me inside about what is my purpose, and I love that message. Is basically to serve. That's it's not the mechanical things that we do on a daily basis, but it's I think how we serve and how we love.
Yes. And what I look to do in these classes is to create a kind of atmosphere. And if I do a pretty good job in creating that atmosphere, people wind up having a positively oriented experience. And all of these thoughts and feelings going on about, vulnerability and honesty, or this and that, and none of that's really being said. And it's great if somebody's thinking that. I like to lead people into having a positively oriented experience. And Denny says what at this point in time?
It's a positive experience, and I was thinking mentally about some of the techniques as far as that breathing, and when you have that gap in your breathing, or more so your speaking as well, people pay more attention, but we tend to be more in tune than somebody speaking quickly all the time and trying to put all this stuff out. And so I've been and learned a lot today. So it's up here and then here as well.
Yeah, and what I was mentioning, having learned about sales from Rob, like selling without selling, one thing everybody knows is that almost every salesperson, male or female, they talk faster than they usually talk when they're actually in the act of selling.
Hmm.
And it's like they want to get that all in as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
So, Denny, how about you?
Um, interesting. So part of what came up for me a bit were some different conceptual connections, right, to what you were saying that I'm familiar with, and it was sort of triggering this thought and that thought, and some of those thoughts how they conflict. And what was interesting about it was that those are the kind of things that sometimes I will get myself wrapped up into in my head about the conflict or this or that kind of thing. And I just allowed myself to stay like very present in my body and focused on the being presence. And what I noticed was that like those sort of conflicting ideas and thoughts, it was okay. I mean, they weren't engaging in any sort of battle. They were just both sort of there in the space, but it was all okay and is sitting sort of within this content body space, which was kind of nice.
Okay, great. And I would just say it a little bit differently if you don't mind. I was feeling more at one than I often am. And I was feeling sort of content. So again, I'm just saying this again, gently and sweetly, is we really need to, all of us, including me, of course, we really need to be careful about saying less it. It made me feel X and Y is almost always incorrect. I started feeling X and Y. And this slower way of talking gives you and everybody else the time to do some of this processing without feeling like you're lagging behind. Yes, I think anyway. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I appreciate the rewording on that. That's nice. More concise and simpler and more agency in that.
Okay. Julie,
Yeah.
Julie, who still owes me a selfie. Go ahead.
I owe you a selfie. I didn't know that was part of the deal. Okay, I'll try to remember that. Um, it's been interesting. Just use the it. So my experience has been interesting because I started the session in a fair amount of Cossacks pain. And I kind of just settled in the noticing to the more pleasant sensations in my body. And then I began to kind of try to like just keep checking back with the Cossacks and just saying, hey, what's up down there? And it got lighter and lighter. And I think it was all
I got
tracking.
lighter and lighter.
I got lighter and lighter. So it's giving me some, no, I feel I have some control over how I can handle that sensation when the sensation wants to be noticed.
Yeah, great. And you see how Julie already started making the corrections in herself and what she was saying. It wasn't doing anything. She
Yeah.
was doing a whole bunch of different things, and she was beginning to feel more empowered. And you see, that's a product of the context that I've been trying to set up here today. I didn't talk about, as far as I can remember anyway, I didn't talk about being empowered and so forth and so on, but someone feels empowered. Another person feels more positive than they felt in a while and so forth and so on. That's the context that I'm setting up. So, okay, this is class number 2. And I will ask all of you, if you're enjoying yourself, pass the word around to some of your friends. Maybe you'll even give me like their email address and I'll put them on my mailing list or whatever so that we can get enough people. I mean, it's a nice size class. I think almost exactly the same as last week, but we can be certain to have enough people to keep this going. Okay, and since at least for the time being, the classes are for free, I'm not asking you to be a salesman as such and sell anything for me. I'm just asking you to pass the word around if you're really enjoying yourself and learning, and other people can learn and enjoy themselves as well. And every class, my long-term friend Joel Elfman is playing a crucial role in making the whole Zoom atmosphere work. And wow, thanks Rob for making it clear to us that we weren't recording, because that would have been funny. We get to the end and someone says, Charlie, I'm just wondering, I don't see the record button. So thanks for that again, Rob. And we can, if and when you show up for these classes regularly, you'll become part of a supportive community where you can say within reason whatever you're feeling and thinking, and you'll wind up feeling supported by the other people that are here. And I think that's important also. So,
Charlie,
yes.
so just in the interest of, since you had such a wonderful shirt last time, I think you should show them a full view of this.
Well, I'm hesitant to show off my shirts because Rob gets a little jealous when I do that.
Oh, okay.
But this is a special shirt that I happened to run across on the internet. And
Charlie, I think that's my favorite so far.
okay, good. I'll make sure not to wear it again. No, and I'll tell you seriously, every time I wear this shirt out and about during the course of the day, I get 1 to 3 compliments about it, which I love, because I'm that kind of guy. And so, yeah, this is a great shirt. Great shirt indeed.
Just confirms that you're a cool cat.
Yes, I'm a cool cat. Yes. So, thank you to everyone, and always welcome to see if you send me a little email that says something about your experience today. That can be great because it's a learning experience for me. And for instance, last week, a couple of people said, wow, I was really moved when you talked about your cancer. And I'm telling these stories. I think every story I tell when it's all said and done has a positive value to it. And I'm telling these stories to help you understand that, for instance, with a cancer story, even in the toughest of circumstances, the tougher the circumstance is, the greater your opportunity to triumph. So I hope most of the time I'm talking with a little bit of consciousness, paying attention that I'm not just going on and on and on like I'm sitting at the pub on a Friday night or something. But it was really good for me to hear 2 different people said, wow, I was really moved by your cancer story. So thank you to everyone. It just becomes so clear when you teach a class like this that without you guys, this class would have no reason or no purpose. So hopefully I'll see all of you and maybe even a few more in 2 weeks from now. So thank you so much.